Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Oh man, should have maybe just said hello, darkness, my old friend. We're back in it, aren't we? We are back in it. My word, as Saturdays go, July the 26th served up a bit of a shocker for Tottenham Hotspur. It really did. It has been put to me that I maybe managed to do the reverse of the day off thing that seems to happen for me in terms of kind of worked a double shift with a double header of Spurs matches today, and I think it had a reverse effect. Just it all went very wrong today. The Morgan Gibbs-White farce reaching its conclusion, I suppose, on Saturday evening was like the embarrassing cherry on top of the transfer cake after 180 minutes or so of Spurs football that really, I think, just showed the scale of what not only Thomas Frank, but, Daniel Levy, Johan Langer, what lies ahead, what they have to do and what they cannot allow this football team to become this season. I mean, at Kenilworth Road, I could see them just to my right-hand side from the press box. Levy and Langer were there watching a very, very drab Spurs affair. Vinay Venkatesham was there as well, could see him. It was just a day when things that just could go wrong for Spurs went wrong. Earlier in the morning, I had to watch cover the first game via both my laptop kind of at home and then laptop in motion while heading to Kenilworth Road. I wasn't driving, but on that you could see Johan Langer on his phone at the training ground for the first game against Wickham. And in the days of when we used to kind of hope Fabio Paratici was doing things on his phone that were going to bring at least transfers to Tottenham, I think we're thinking the same with Johan Langer and hoping that some of his contacts can be mined for special things, because right now Spurs feel like they're stuttering and stumbling a little bit, just a tad. I think the problem is, and we'll keep going back to the fact that, only last month we had Daniel Levy declaring the Europa League was not enough, and that he wanted to lift and Tottenham to lift the Premier League trophy, the Champions League trophy. He wanted it all. And you just knew that in the moment he said that, the football gods were going, how fantastic, what a wonderful opportunity you have given us here to have some fun at Tottenham's expense. And that fun at Spurs' expense seems to have come from Tottenham utterly wasting 2.5 weeks following the events of, let's call it, release clause gate, which we've spent so much time over on those last 2 weeks or so. So 2.5 weeks thinking, okay, legal matters, Morgan Gibbs-White, hopefully we can get there in the end, lads. Only to read on Nottingham Forest's social media accounts tonight or Saturday night, I am filming this very late again, those words, a statement of intent from our owner Evangelos Marinakis as Morgan Gibbs-White signs a record deal at the club until the summer of 2028. It's quite funny, isn't it? The way they kind of say these things for us. Can you imagine Spurs saying, well done, Daniel, kind of thing? It's just not the way that a lot of clubs come or operate. But look, to be fair to Marinakis, he got the job done. He got what he wanted out of the scenario. Because, after threatening legal action all round, he apparently flew to Portugal, where Forest are having their pre-season training camp. I think maybe Faro, or certainly played a game in Faro against Fulham last night. And he went there, and via whatever means he managed it, he finally got Morgan Gibbs-White to sign his record new contract at the club without a release clause, apparently, or so reportedly. And that comes after almost a year of Morgan Gibbs-White saying, no, I don't want a new contract. No, I'm not even going to enter talks. And there, lo and behold, comes this bumper new contract, 3-year deal. It's... We've been here before. this is not the first time that Spurs have gone after a player, looked to be signing them only for that player to sign a new contract at their club. Jack Grealish still, for me, the most ridiculous of them all. But this maybe is the first time that Spurs have met a release clause, arranged a medical, which never happened in the end, yet still managed to lose a player to a new contract. Hey, they love to do unprecedented things, do Tottenham Hotspur. Let me know. I might be forgetting someone. Maybe they have done that in the past. I mean, look, as I said, for all the talk of Marinakis and his escapades at Forest, going onto the pitch, talking to Nuno, all of these various things, and the statements the club make during his time, he's put his money where his mouth is, and he's delivered for his club exactly what they needed. Having lost Elanga to Newcastle, he then, despite there being a release clause, has secured the future of their best player for at least, a little while. And also seemingly removed the way that he can, get out of there for a fee that is below whatever value they want to place on him. So whether it annoys the hell out of Tottenham and us because they're not getting a player that I still think was perfect for Thomas Frank's system, fair play. He's managed to do exactly what he set out to do. And look, I think it's an example that Tottenham kind of need to learn from in one respect, or heed that example, because Spurs have really, especially when it comes to their star players, have kind of eventually had to sell them often because their contracts are running down. I'm trying to think, and again, help me out on this. The last time I think Spurs tied down a key player to kind of a long-term contract was Sonny's deal 4 years ago. I think a key player who was wanted by others. I'm not talking about very young players on new contracts. I'm talking about kind of players in their prime kind of thing. And it is that same contract that Sonny is now approaching his final 11 months of. So I kind of feel like if anything can come from this utter mess, it is that Spurs need, in my opinion, to go out there and offer Christian Romero a club record deal of their own. That would be a lesson learned from this. It's, don't worry, I want transfers, everything like this, but I'm thinking internally, that's something that they can learn from it. Because, let's be honest, his route to Atletico Madrid looks to be closing. You can never rule it out entirely, but it looks to be closing, especially they've just signed David Hanko from Feyenoord as well. And Romero seems to be settling into life with Thomas Frank. Even the Bilbao program's starting to kind of fall over and just give up. Just noticed that out of the corner of my eye. He looks like he's kind of getting into what Frank wants of him. You could see it today. There's a good video doing the rounds of. I keep saying today. Sorry, it's late at night. Yesterday, of Romero having a really, let's say, collaborative discussion with Thomas Frank in the rain at the training ground friendly against Wickham over kind of, looks like tactics. They're doing lots of kind of hand things about where to be on the pitch as well. And it's not like having a pop, having a moan, having a whinge or anything. You can see, and I said this before, Thomas Frank is a very collaborative coach. And with Romero kind of being, he's certainly a star man when it comes to kind of players at the back, and his biggest winner, I suppose. It looked like a very collaborative conversation. It came just after, I think, Thomas Frank had wheeled out the tactics board at half-time, which I think he's still using Tottenham as red. Doesn't bother me, really. I have always had an aversion to red pretty much since. Although, yes, I know it's kind of orange. That's red as well. What a stupid statement to make. But on the whole in life, I have, just as a childhood thing. But I know some people would just little things that wind them up, like the AIA on the shirt. Where was I? Yes. But anyway, back to Romero. Back to away from little side things like that. He is Spurs' biggest winner. Like I said, he's lifted the World Cup, the Copa America twice, the Finalissimo as well. He's won. Pivotal figure in the Europa League triumph as well. He makes others around him better when he is on form, when he is in his groove. And for me, for everything he's achieved, he deserves to be rewarded for that. with a fitting contract. And let's be honest, he is embarking as a centre-back on his peak years now. He's 27 years old. This kind of this period of his career, 27 to 30, 31, is really when centre-backs are absolutely hitting their stride. And look, I know that he will no doubt look at Tottenham in its current state, and having publicly questioned a lack of investment before, we've seen him do an interview which spoke about that compared to other clubs. He will need to be convinced about what lies ahead and whether Daniel Levy's words we spoke about before will be backed up by action. And look, the Gibbs-White farce has only really compounded what was also some concerns on the pitch is probably the best way to put it. It was like, look, I know it's still the early stages of pre-season, and pre-season is very much about getting minutes in legs. I absolutely appreciate that. So I don't want to read too much into the overall aspect of Spurs, but what I would say that just worried me a little bit was that you had 24 different Spurs first-team players yesterday, never really looking like scoring against two League One sides for quite long periods of matches. They eventually got two against Wickham and had a couple more chances in that game. I would mostly say because of Pedro Porro, their playmaking right back. But I would say on the whole, they weren't great in either game against lower league opposition. And it is worth noting that the next four matches brings Tottenham up against Arsenal, Newcastle, Bayern Munich and PSG. I know. And look, I know I've just said it's all about getting minutes and legs and things like that, and a lot of those players got 60 minutes, 75 minutes or so today. But it's also about putting in place patterns of play and good processes, I think, to just ensure that you're going to hit the ground running when the season comes. And I know they've had 3 games so far. My only little concern in that regard is that with the previous managers, because we've had many of them in recent years, you could kind of see their quite clear, defined style of play and those patterns of play within the opening games. Even if they lost them or drew them or whatever, you could see what was trying to be done. And I don't think we've seen that with Thomas Frank yet. We've seen little elements of it. You can see, especially in the Wickham game, you can see some quite high pressing up the pitch. There were some little moments like that. A little bit Poch-like in the way they played in terms of the 4-2-3-1 as well. But not really enough of it yet, and especially the Luton game. I will never get those 90 minutes or so of my life back. That was just so dull. It was so dull. It was, thank goodness it was quite a sunny day. That was about the only thing to take away from it, and going to a very old school stadium like Kenilworth Road. But I think the biggest worry for me in terms of the start of the season especially is that Thomas Frank, the team he's inherited is kind of bears little difference to the creativity shorn one that they ended the season under Postecoglou with. We had those matches towards the end of the season where you could see they had no playmaker in the final third. They had no number 10. And they were going into games just trying to create through any possible other means, whether it was through Porro, whether it was from lumping balls into the box or trying to get wide. And there were so many games where we were just like, oh my goodness, they don't even look like they're going to score a goal. And it feels like that team is still there. It's especially the one against Luton, because we're seeing Matisse Tell still having to play up front as a striker. And look, don't get me wrong, Mohamed Kudus will provide excitement. He'll provide space for others with his dribbling as well. Not as good today against Luton. End product lacking, but certainly was one of the more enthusiastic players on the day, is maybe the best way to put it. But I just feel like this glaring problem comes from that empty Gibbs-White shaped hole, I suppose, in the number 10 area. Obviously, there is in-house solutions to that, but they're just not really there yet. James Maddison back in full training after his knee injury. However, these fixtures yesterday came too soon for him, wasn't able to take part. He was at the Wickham game kind of watching forlornly over the railings. I put it in the live blog I was running from that game that I kind of got the sense he wasn't going to go on to play at Luton because while everyone else was in their tracksuits ready to go, he was there just in a pair of shorts, little white socks, and a tracksuit top, training top. He looked like someone that was either had just been from or going to like an individual session or something. He didn't look like someone that was heading towards a match. So you've got him. He's going to need time and games to get back to anywhere near the rhythm they need him to be, which doesn't bode well, of course, going into these big games, especially the PSG one. Dejan Kulusevski nowhere near returning yet. Obviously had the patella surgery on his knee in mid-May. Thomas Frank warned everyone that he would, not to expect him back for the first game of the season, the Premier League game against Burnley. I would say he's expected to miss far more than that. Got a lot of rehab to do on that right knee. And look, without either of those players, Spurs just lack ideas. They lack an ability to get the ball anywhere near the opposition goal. And just to kind of sum that up against Luton, 2 shots all game, just the one on target. And we had matches towards the end of last season that were similar to that, where there was no creativity whatsoever. Bearing in mind Josh Keeley, who made the move to Luton in the week for £1 million, he was named man of the match on his debut for the Hatters. And to be perfectly honest, he probably doesn't exactly know why. Because other than some quite nifty footwork and distribution, didn't really have anything to do on the day. It was probably one of the easiest days he's had in a long time between the sticks. It was Luton that had 11 shots at goal, albeit only 2 on target. They managed 15 touches in the Spurs box. Spurs could only get 10 in the Luton box, and 6 of those came from Kudus. Brennan Johnson had another 2. Will Lancashire got the final 2 in the final moments, as he had only Spurs' second shot of the game, dragging one a little bit wide. The only other effort really came from Kudus, who was played into the box by Tell and just kind of scuffed a shot, which was blocked by a defender. I couldn't tell from my angle whether it was going in or not, but I think they recorded it as an on-target shot, so presumably it was. And there were periods in the game where the Luton fans were singing "Champions of Europe, you're having a laugh." Couldn't argue with that. They did not look like a team of European champions, of Europa League champions. And look, I know that it's split across. There were 2 teams. There's certain players that maybe would be in Spurs, certainly would be in the Spurs' strongest 11 that weren't playing at Luton, but I still want to see the style. I want to see the patterns of play. And, I know you can also have teams that maybe don't have the correct blend, but that lack of playmaking and creativity does scare the life out of me. It really does. And just, it needs to be fixed. It really does. And I felt sorry for Mikey Moore. Mikey Moore was kind of thrown in there, 17-year-old thrown into the number 10 role behind Tell. And a Tell is not the best person to kind of play a number 10 behind in my mind, because Tell does not really want to stay as a lone striker. He knows it's not his strength. He knows it's not really where he should be. And he roams. He'll head off to the flanks, and that leaves this awkward thing where Moore might be picking up the ball in the midfield or number 10 area, and there's no one really in front of him to play the ball to. And kind of Julie, he only touched the ball 22 times across 77 minutes of football, and not one of those touches came in the Luton box. We know that because there were only 3 people that did that. Kudus, Johnson and Lancashire. His passing was accurate, Michael Moore. 15 of his 16 passes reached the target, but that's probably because they were safer balls. I think I remember 1 decent through ball, but on the whole, he's not probably going to thread the kind of balls that someone like a James Maddison would do. We know Mikey's more of a dribbler. He gets the ball, he goes, and there are only a couple of moments where he was able to do that. It was right towards the end, really, before he came off. And he kept having to kind of come deep to get the ball because, like I said, just wasn't getting it. I mean, 22 touches was the fewest of any of the Spurs players who started the game. It was the second fewest out of any player that started the game on both sides. And yeah, like I said, there were no patterns of play to present him with the ball in good areas. And that's part of the system. It's all very well passing it around the back, but you've got to have the ability to get the ball beyond and to the players kind of getting into these advanced areas. And look, I reported earlier this week, Mikey wants to head out on loan this season. And I kind of feel like, he wants it for week in, week out football to kind of keep his development going. I think it's very difficult to argue against that because it's clear he needs this regular football to build on the ability he's got. And I just feel like, I know there's a homegrown aspect to it, but just getting the odd minute here and there and kind of just being a number because of the Champions League squad just doesn't really do any favours to a player who's got the ability to be, a potential star of the future for Spurs. I think physically he's got to keep growing, getting bigger. It's like, you kind of look at someone like him, and like you look at Vuskovic. Vuskovic is a bit of a mountain of an 18-year-old. Even Will Lancashire, I know he's a little bit older, but he's always kind of been this big support striker. Whereas Mikey Moore looks like a young player. He looks like a 16, 17-year-old. And I think he'll get stronger. And as he gets stronger, he'll become an even better player for it. And I think it's such a cliche, I know, but being toughened up a little bit by playing regular senior football in a league like the Championship, I think would do him wonders. Or even heading abroad, going somewhere like Germany or something, a similar league, I think would do him wonders. He just needs to play week in, week out and kind of build that strength. And what I would say is probably, maybe it's just because he had the impetus of slightly hungry younger players coming on, but they looked that marginally better when Jamie Donnelly was able to switch into the number 10 role. He, if you weren't aware, had to play 77 minutes or so as a left-back because Destiny Udogie felt something in a warm-up and had to come out of the lineup even though he was on the team sheet. And poor old Jamie, it's not poor old Jamie, he gets to play football. He gets to play an entire match. The only player to play the entire match for Spurs, showing his kind of fitness levels. But, yeah, I just feel he's wasted at left back. He can do some little nice things. He can get some deeper crosses into the area, but ultimately you're wasting a player with his playmaking ability to shove him back there. He should be right up the pitch. And also with Jamie, if you're going to say there's one thing he probably lacks, it is that little bit of kind of acceleration. His overall pace isn't bad. He was high up in those 1 kilometre sprints, wasn't he? But I would say his little burst of acceleration isn't there. And I think as a left back, he can get beaten far too comfortably, I think, by wingers. But if you get him operating in that kind of pocket as a number 10, I think he'd be absolutely fine, which was a shame for me why he didn't start. But, yeah, Thomas Frank said after about the Luton game. The Luton game, that was the game where I felt, okay, there's a bit to be worked on. That was two mixed teams, a little out of sync. The boys put everything into it. They were positive, heads down, working hard. But those connections and relationships, they definitely weren't fluent. But it's good to have something to work on. Maybe they shouldn't have always had their head down. Maybe they should have had their heads up and I could have played some more creative passes. Look, I don't think there's any getting away from it. Spurs, who fly off today, Sunday, to the heat of Hong Kong and South Korea, they need a big purchase for me in that number 10 role. I know there's other areas they need people at number 6. Potentially a left back for me, and also replacing any of those many players that I think are going to have to depart as well. But I just still think a number 10 is huge. I think we all kind of thought it was going to be Gibbs-White, and he kind of was almost an ideal solution to it because I guess he's mobile, creative number 10. He can play deeper, and he's a player that Thomas Frank has wanted for years. So frustrating that's not going to happen. But Spurs now need to act quickly to sign an alternative player on the list. They will have had other options on that list, but they need to move quick because, like I said earlier, they have thrown away a couple of weeks worth of the transfer window down the drain, concentrating on one transfer. And after all those declarations about kind of wanting to win it all, Spurs are kind of not only being left behind by their rivals in the transfer window, they're being pretty much buried by their rivals in the transfer window, I would say. In the time Spurs have signed Kudus, I suppose they made Tell's loan permanent, and obviously Kota Takai's £5 million move, although he's yet to play for the club because of that training ground knock. all of the kind of big boys have just not stood still in the Premier League. They have absolutely gone out there and made kind of Spurs activity either look like signings on inexperience, apart from Kudus, or pocket change. I mean, even Man U are the team Spurs beat in that final. And they've signed real quality in Mbeumo, in Mateus Cunha as well. Obviously got Diego Leon as well. I think they've 131 million. I think they've spent so far this summer. Man City, even though they don't really need too much, they've spent 126 million on 4 different players. But that's, even those 2 clubs are nothing compared with another 3 clubs. You know, the top 2 last season, Liverpool and Arsenal, Chelsea as well. You know, Liverpool completed the £69 million deal, didn't they, for Hugo Ekitike, and obviously that comes on the heels of potential British record transfer, £116 million on Florian Wirtz. They've spent £269 million, apparently, Liverpool. Arsenal obviously got Gyökeres today. Don't know why I said his name twice. That takes their spending to over £200 million. And, you know, there's the terrifying prospect that they go for someone like Eberechi Eze as well. And then don't forget, like I said, Chelsea, the other one as well. £212 million they've spent on João Pedro, Jamie Gittins, Liam Delap, among others as well. And all of that, you know, we had that wonderful moment where we're like, Kudus, Gibbs-White, they're going for it. And they just kind of put all their eggs in that Gibbs-White basket, and it obviously hasn't worked out. And it kind of feels like now Spurs are just looking up and kind of gawping at all of these people going up the transfer ladder ahead of them, when really they need to be kind of jumping up and grabbing the ankles of those people and trying to claw them back towards them, because, you know, they got a big old distance to make up in the Premier League, and they're not making it up in the transfer market at all. Just this should really be a time when they're pushing on. It's no longer an era anymore in the transfer market where doing one decent sized transfer is enough. It's not the way. You know, £55 million towards Kudus is it's great. It's what's needed, but it's kind of just the tip of the iceberg compared to what the other sides are spending. Look, and everyone knows Spurs were prepared to spend £60 million on Gibbs-White. So they'll have to invest that now elsewhere. That needs to go. There can't now be any kind of like, oh, we're going to sell to buy in terms of finance, because we know they were going to do that deal. I know they have to get players out the door to create space. That's a whole different thing. But yeah, it's just this really weird period for me now. Spurs know how to kind of find a way to suck the joy out of stuff, don't they? You know, they finally won that long craved for trophy. Champions League football to look forward to next season, and obviously use that to entice players with as well. Yet it feels like we're in that familiar theme with Spurs where they make one step forward and then kind of stumble 2 steps back again. Even the injuries are creeping back in now as well. You got Dominic Solanke, minor ankle injury. They didn't use him today because of a precaution. Doggy felt something in the warm-up, like I said. Takai has arrived injured. He actually turned up in the second half at Luton. Was it second half? I think it was second half. They had to have kind of someone escort him around the pitch to the dugout where he was just kind of going to watch the game. I don't know why he arrived a little bit later than everyone else. But there you go. Maybe some kind of injury stuff he was doing. Manol Solomon, we haven't even mentioned as well. He's injured from a training ground knock as well. In fact, all of Spurs' team sheets for the first 3 pre-season games of the season or summer have all ended up being incorrect by the time the first whistle has blown. First game you had Vicario down on the team sheet, and actually Antonin Kinski had been a late switch and he started. Rodrigo Bentancur this morning was on the team sheet to play Wickham, ended up feeling ill and not being able to start that match. And we had a Doggy who was on the team sheet, and then we all looked at the line as they were lining up for the start of the game. We were like, "It's Jamie Donnelly. What's Jamie Donnelly doing out there?" So he was kind of thrown into the action. So yeah, injuries, quite a few injuries, and some key players in there as well. You would imagine somewhere Ange Postecoglou is like just awaiting the finger of blame to kind of go on him, just thinking it's not me, it's not me, it's not my fault. Yeah, and look, I know it's still relatively early days, but what is it? More than a month left of the window, but it just, I suppose you can't be in panic stations yet, but it just felt like a summer when Spurs had to act swiftly and decisively. They just can't afford to have a poor start to the season under Thomas Frank, especially after not only making such a big change in the dugout, sacking a trophy-winning manager after all those years of waiting for one, but also making these big declarations that Daniel Levy did. They've got to absolutely hit the season like a freight train, really. And look, it was. I know we spoke about off the pitch stuff as well, but on the pitch, there are a few positives. I was trying to think of them. I mean, mentioned earlier, Pedro Porro still is a kind of a bit of a shining light in the playmaking side of things from right back. But mostly, I'd say probably the positives were from younger players. Pat Matsar showed his quality in finishing. He was playing a far more advanced role in that game against Wickham as loath to say a number 10, it's almost like a support striker. At times he was right alongside Richarlison up front. And two quite nice poacher strikes that he scored. One following up an Odebear shot, another one linking up with Tynan Thompson really well. And yeah, he did fine. Richarlison alongside him looked like a player just playing his first minutes of pre-season, looked quite rusty. George Abbott, who came in for Bentancur, I thought had a good game. He, really energetic, played alongside Lucas Bergvall, was kind of really setting the tone with his pressing as well from the midfield. Look, I know he's likely to head out on loan. That's kind of the expectation, but I'd like to think he will make quite a positive impact on Frank and the coaches. Obviously, Matty Wells will know all about him, so will Stuart Lewis on that coaching setup, but you would think that barring any kind of late loan moves for him, Donnelly, probably Devine, they'll head off on the tour. Certainly I saw Jamie Donnelly in his post-match interview kind of pretty much said that he was heading off on the tour. I thought George kind of really kind of just put in another reasonable, decent performance, really. Like I said, Tynan Thompson as well, he's 17 years old, came off the bench, set up Sar's second goal, so some nice kind of aggressive pressing from Christian Romero. Came to Sar, kind of played a 1-2 with Thompson. Luka Vuskovic, he's only a year older than Tynan Thompson. He looks solid, again, not as eye-catching, of course, as the first game against Reading, but he looks solid. They had Romero on the left-hand side alongside Vuskovic. It was Vuskovic who played quite a forward, quick ball into Pedro Porro's path that led to Odebear coming inside having the shot that Sarr followed up early in the game. All behind them, Brandon Austin did have a nightmare. That was definitely a negative. It was an awful moment for him. Armando Quintana had this low shot cutting inside that was just trundling along towards Austin, and he just did that kind of awful bit where the basics aren't being done right, and the ball just kind of went between his hands, between his legs. It was just a horrendous kind of bit of goalkeeping, and such a shame, really, because obviously getting his Premier League debut last season and doing well kind of under pressure in a couple of big matches as well, Thomas Frank would have seen something like that and just said, like, I've given you your first chance of pre-season. You've kind of shoveled it yourself into your own goal through your own arms and legs. And it doesn't speak volumes for him in terms of being able to handle moments like that. Again, I know it's a friendly, but it won't have done himself any favours there as well. And especially on the day, I suppose, where you get to see Spurs' fourth choice keeper getting man of the match, whether he deserved it or not, for Luton on his debut for them after getting the move he needed in Josh Keeley. Luton game, positive pickings were slim. Like I said, Tell and Kudus were enthusiastic, albeit lacking in end product. Tell, like I said, I still don't really like him up front. I think maybe we'll see him as a support striker at times, but leading the line, just, no, doesn't work for me. some iffy performances. Jed Spence, Brennan Johnson, Archie Gray, tough days at the office, I would say. None of those three really convinced me on the day. Yves Bissouma. Yves Bissouma just frustrates me in terms of he should be dominating a League One midfield. He should be absolutely bossing it against a midfield of that kind of level in the game. And he just really didn't at all. Spurs are going to progress their interest we spoke about before in João Palhinha. Palhinha, isn't it? Then it's got to be Bissouma, hasn't it? That kind of makes way. I kind of reported in the week that if they're going to sign another central midfielder like that, a defensive midfielder, they're going to have to get rid of the ones they got. And I think Bissouma, with 11 months left in his contract, probably earning reasonable money as well, as he was a slightly cheaper transfer because he was in the final 12 months of his contract at Brighton. I think he has to be the one to go. But there's this weird thing. I was talking with George Sessions from PA about this on the way up. There's this thing about Spurs that is there. It's true that their wage structure is not as kind of lofty as impressive as some of these other clubs and what they can offer players. But they also have this issue where it's still a load more than a lot of the foreign clubs that Spurs then try to offload the players they don't want on. So you have these scenarios where the players are a bit like, well, why would I move for less money? Why would I get less a week anywhere? And that is the problem. If Spurs don't buy players of the quality they require, I said like that, authority, respect my authority. If they're not going to get the kind of players that are of the required quality, then you are going to have to look to move them on to clubs that are of a lower level that cannot afford the same wages or the same transfer fees, and they just get themselves stuck in this perennial cycle of just having a bloated squad of no use. Bryan Gil is out in Spain just training away now. It's like it doesn't even exist at Spurs. He's kind of moving on in his rehab. There's little clips he had on his Instagram the other day where he's going through proper stuff, like hitting the ball, crosses into the box, volleying it into the net and stuff. You don't do that unless your knee is getting to a stage where you can play, probably on the way to playing matches. But he's not at Spurs. He's in Spain. I presume we're going to get that message, aren't we, about who's not gone on the tour, and the old classic of, have been left behind to explore transfer opportunities. Bryan Gil, you would think would be one of them. And we'll see if there's any kind of surprise inclusions. I was trying to think if there's anyone who hasn't appeared, who hasn't gone out yet on loan. Yang came on, he looked reasonably bright in his little 15-minute spell, showed a bit of pace. There was one nice touch where he kind of surged forward with the ball. But do they allow him to? I don't think you do. I think because of the tours to Asia as well, I think it's probably important he's there for numerous reasons, just for him to kind of be back in his homeland of South Korea, but obviously also the connection with the fans over there as well. So it'd probably be surprising if he was one that was left behind. Again, in the comments, let me know, who do you think will be left out of the squad? Because is there any point in taking millions of players? I know there's a few injured ones. You'd think Solanke would go, even though it's only like a 7-8 day tour. If it is a minor injury, then surely he could feature against Arsenal or Newcastle. We'll find out swiftly, I suppose, whether Doggies is any more serious than they're kind of made out to be. Manor Solomon, you would think, won't be in that. Madison should go, you'd think. Kulusevski won't, there's no point. Dragishin, he did a little video today kind of making out that he's getting closer. Whether he goes or not, we'll see. It might be premature for him. Bentancur, you'd think illness, as long as it's not something he could spread to everyone, you would think he will travel, unless he travels a bit later by himself once he's cured. Once he's feeling better. I'm sure I've forgotten people. Let me know in the comments below. What other positives? Oh, Janai Byfield came on, 16-year-old, which was really good. He looked very composed, actually. We talk about Mikey kind of looking his age. Janai does look a bit bigger than a 16-year-old. He looks a bit older, and he looks like he's played the game for far longer than a 16-year-old. In the early game against Wickham, actually, we got kind of some minutes for Luca Williams-Barnett, also 16, last 15 or so. I think he also came on at half-time for the second half against Woking for the under-21s and played that game. They lost 2-0. What else? Final 15 against Luton, I would say. I thought the fullbacks did pretty well. Rio Karamartin, who just signed a new contract, he did well at right back. You also had the wonderfully double-barreled Reece Alexander, Russell Denny, who I thought was pretty good on the left. They're both kind of mainly midfielders, although Rio's kind of been kind of more versatile in the last year or so and has been playing in different positions like fullback. But look, all those players I've just mentioned, players for the future. They're not players for the now. Spurs need players for the now. They've got such a huge season ahead where they want to compete in all competitions and they don't want to be embarrassed in the Champions League. They need players for now. They've got this kind of really unbalanced squad, which is like overloaded in some departments and kind of lacking in others. And it's those areas that are leaving Thomas Frank hamstrung. Apologies for using medical language, but you know what I mean. There just feels like right now Spurs are lacking a bit of momentum, both on the pitch and off it. And, you know, I'm not putting that on Thomas Frank. Thomas Frank cannot work miracles. He can't turn what he currently has for me into a Champions League ready outfit, and I don't think it's fair to expect him to either. It just frustrates me. Just really frustrates me that night in Bilbao was meant to be the moment when laughing at Tottenham stopped as a thing. But it kind of feels like with things like this Gibbs-White moment or farce, the kind of sniggering in the background, it's kind of returned a little bit. And I think the only way to silence that sort of noise is action. It's not words. And Spurs have wasted enough time in recent weeks with words and not enough actions. And look, in a week when the famous White Hart Lane gate, synonymous with Bill Nicholson, returns when 17, the club motto, it states it clearly enough. I've said this numerous times and I will always state it. Tottenham need to dare. They need to do. You can't just talk a good game. You've got to do it. And what's the point in having a club motto if you're not going to live by it, not going to operate by it, you're not going to exist by it? Just a little bit nervy about what Spurs are doing right now and kind of the lack of, like I say, forward momentum is probably the best way to put it. And look, hopefully it was just a case of putting eggs in one basket with Gibbs-White. That hasn't happened. Move on. I would love to see a scenario where Spurs, kind of embarrassed by what's happening, just go, right, stuff this for a laugh and go out there and be really proactive in the next couple of days. Bring in people that can join up on the tour. Get them involved quickly. Push forward. Spend the money required to bring in really good Champions League level quality, because they must have learned the lessons of last season. You can't just sign one decent ready-made player and then a lot of youngsters. You need to sign 2 or 3 big Premier League, Champions League ready players. The other clubs are all doing it. There is no excuse right now for Spurs. You can't look at the market and say, oh, it's a quiet transfer window. It's a quiet market. The other teams are racing away right now, and there are some terrifying squads being assembled. And you kind of look at them in comparison to Spurs, and you're like, ooh, that's not good. And they need to remedy that. They have to rectify it. They have to bring in some quality. And look, that investment's got to come in. They've got to get the money in through the doors. They've got to get going. And like I said, that £60 million was going towards Nottingham Forest. So it's there to be spent. You can't kind of offer it for that and then say it's not there for something else. They just need to get moving. Teams need to fear Spurs and what Thomas Frank can do with the team. And just give him a squad that he can just make solid and respectable is not enough. You can't kind of get rid of a manager that's just won your first trophy in 17 years, your first European one in 41, to be solid and respectable. That's boring. It's been years of being solid and respectable at Spurs. They need to be more than that. And, you know, I think Thomas Frank's got the potential to be that kind of manager. I don't doubt him in that respect. I know there's a lack of experience there, but I genuinely think if he has the right tools, I think he could do something really terrific. But if he's not got the right tools and he gets off to a bad start, as he did at Brentford and Brøndby, I think it's all going to go a bit pear-shaped. The atmosphere within the club, the atmosphere at games and stuff, they need to come out roaring at the start, and that is down to the club to kind of make that happen. So yeah, not a good Saturday. Saturdays are overrated anyway, eh? Maybe. So yeah, touring coming. I'm heading off, not tomorrow actually. I'm heading off Monday because it is my youngest graduation. I've got to be there for that just before I head off, which is going to leave me a very tight turnaround between landing and heading to Thomas Frank's press conference there in Hong Kong. So yeah, that might be a bit of a nightmare, but we'll see. But hopefully, by the time I land, I'm hoping even by the time this video goes out in what will be the morning. It's not the morning right now. Well, it is. It's very early hours of the morning. Hopefully, it will date quickly because Spurs will kick into gear and be really ambitious and get things going. If it doesn't date, I guess I'll be disappointed. But yeah, so right. I need to head off. I need to start packing my suitcase. Actually, I haven't done any of that for the tour. And hopefully, while I am packing my bags, Tottenham are doing some daring and some doing. That would be wonderful. Right, time to head off. Next video, we'll see. Depends if I get any spare moments on the tour, which at the moment, looking at the schedule, is a maybe not. But we'll see how it goes if I can carve out some time in what will be my kind of late night there to get it out during the daytime here. We'll see. That might be a doable. Look, if I'm doing them late night at home, I suppose I could do the same over there. Oh, and thank you very much to the very nice people that popped up and said hello to me at Kenilworth Road. Lots of very nice people saying very nice things. It's very kind of you. You don't have to do that. Yeah. Right, let's head off. I've had enough of Saturday, even though it's Sunday today. Yeah. Still, honestly, still seeing that image of him on the pitch with Marinakis, Gibbs-White, and it's just like, brilliant, just brilliant. Come on, Tottenham. Sort it out. Right, time to go. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.